Good morning, I'm Jill Cronin, Director of Operations at the 5% Club, and welcome to our event, Harnessing Emerging Talent to Build Back Better. I'd like to thank all the speakers who've joined us today. We've got an amazing lineup. Before we progress with our event, I do just want to do a few housekeeping points. Firstly, your cameras and your mics are off, but we really want you to interact with us. So please join us in chat to post your questions, where I'll be there to answer questions, as well as Mark Cameron, who will be coming in later. This event is also being recorded, so if you have to leave early or if you want to share it with colleagues, it will be made available later. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our patrons, whose logos are displayed here. Without their support, none of this would be possible. So on to our first session. I'm delighted to say that earlier this morning, we were joined by Minister for Apprenticeships and Skills, Gillian Keegan, and the founder of the 5% Club, Leo Quinn, Group CEO of Balfour Beatty. They joined us in conversation about skills and apprenticeships. I'm delighted to welcome today Gillian Keegan, Minister for Apprenticeship and Skills, and Leo Quinn, who founded the 5% Club in 2013 and is Group CEO of Balfour Beatty. Leo's also recently joined the Prime Minister's Build Back Better Business Council. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us today. I was really taken with the fact, when I was looking up both of you, that you both started your working life in earn and learn positions. Gillian, what inspired your decision to become an apprentice at the age of 16, which was incredibly young, and helped with your career path thereafter?
Well, actually, it was a teacher. And I think, often when you're in school, I went to a comprehensive school in Knowsley, which, let's just say, it wasn't, didn't always have the best outcomes. So 92% of the kids didn't leave with any GCSEs or O-levels as they were then. But I actually got 10 O-levels, but I just didn't know. I think, like many young people, you don't know anything really about careers. You don't know what's available. You don't know what all the jobs are. I'd done a Saturday job, so I knew some of those jobs. I knew I didn't want to work with fish because there was a fish shop next to my Saturday job, so I didn't like the smell of fish. But apart from that, I was pretty open, to be honest, to suggestions. And I was quite curious. And it was my maths teacher who said, look, if you go for a good quality apprenticeship, they'll help you. They'll help you discover what the careers are, what the world of business and what the world of work has to offer. They'll also help you with your studies. And as it turned out, I started off with a BTEC and then went to HNC, and it became a degree level apprenticeship. It didn't start out like that. So it was a fantastic decision. I can't praise the rotational degree level apprenticeships or any higher level apprenticeship enough, but particularly one where you can start at a level you feel comfortable and go up, because I really found that was a life changer for me.
Brilliant. And I mean, here you are as Minister for Apprenticeships and Skills, which just goes to show the progression path that an apprenticeship can lead to, which is and
the first apprentice to hold this role, which I will never get tired of saying, actually, because it's kind of it says it all, doesn't it?
Great sign of the times, yeah. And what piece of advice would you offer a young person starting out their career today?
I think there's two things. I think the first thing is to be curious. I always find it odd. I think a lot of young people, it's the worst question, isn't it? It's what do you want to do? Do you know what you want to do? And you're kind of like a rabbit in the headlights, because even if you do think you want to do something, it's only what you know normally, or what somebody else around you is doing. There's so many jobs that are available, so much variety in the world of work, lots of different industry sectors, lots of different roles. So the first thing I'd say is just be curious. Be curious. Try to get as much interaction or experience. Ask as many people as possible. Everybody you meet wants to help a young person, so use that. Ask anybody. And then the second thing I would say, and this is probably something more for the times today, is take your decisions seriously. I'm often struck at how many young people just automatically now think it's university, and they make a £50,000 investment decision in themselves without really even thinking much about what they want to study or what they want it to go on to, or what kind of careers are available as a result of what they study. And that's why we end up sometimes with people studying something that doesn't get them into a career that they're interested in. So I think, take that decision seriously, because, that's why we're introducing this lifelong earning and this lifelong entitlement, because people always feel like it's something they have to do at 18 and then they never get the chance to do it again. So it's quite a big decision. Take that one seriously.
Thank you. And Leo, that brings us nicely onto your career path. You actually started on a grad programme, amazing, at Balfour Beatty, so you've gone full circle. Do you think if you were starting your career today, you might consider an apprenticeship instead of going to university? And what advice would you offer young people starting out today?
Well, I'd like to start out by commenting on Gillian's presentation. And personally, I'd have nothing said against fish, because my first job was as a Saturday boy in McFisheries. And I spent 2 years doing that job. And what was really fascinating about it is it's incredible what you learned through that experience, because apart from the skill of how to fillet fish and sell fish, it was also, how do you interact with customers? How do you build up personal confidence? How do you learn to speak to people? And at the age of 16, we don't all realize just how naive we really are. And those sorts of things bring out learnings in us, and they build confidence. And all of those things actually, I think, help make us the man or the woman. And some of the advice I would give on the back of that is, some of the secrets of success, I think, are just turning up. There's nothing wrong in just turning up and actually seeing what happens. And the more times you turn up, the more chance you have of actually being successful. Anthony Robbins, who's one of these great motivational speakers, talks about the fact that, Kentucky Fried Chicken, when Colonel Sanders first went out on his journey to sell that, he knocked on 99 doors before he got his first person to actually buy the recipe. Life is like that. It's about knocking on doors, and it's about turning up. And through that, you learn. And in that learning experience, you then are able to make choices as to what you actually want to do. So if I go back to my own personal career, I started 40 odd years ago with Balfour Beatty, straight out of university. And funny enough, it was the first interview I turned up at, and they offered me a job. But what was interesting before that, and you asked me about whether I'd take on an apprenticeship, is that prior to that, I went to Surrey University. And at Surrey University, I did electronic and electrical engineering. And at the end of my first year, I failed and I got thrown out of university. And so all of a sudden, I had to think about, what was I going to do? And I had the choice as to whether I was going to be a painter or whether I was going to go to Portsmouth Polytechnic and do my degree. And it so transpired that I was better going to a technical type of college or university than I was actually when I went to Surrey University. So I went on and I did my degree in 3 years, and very successfully, and then later went on to do a master's at Imperial College London. So for me, if I was to look at it today, I could easily have gone and done an apprenticeship or the degree the way I did it. It was just so happened that the doors were open and I went in through a certain door, and that was the outcome of it. The difference, I think, primarily for a lot of people is that if you go and do a degree today, at the end of it, you end up with £50,000 worth of debt. If you actually do an apprenticeship, you're paid all the way through it. And at the end of that experience, you don't have the debt. So, you're paid to learn and earn at the same time. And I think that's a big advantage. And, you've got to learn what you personally are capable of. And what environment do you best learn? Do you best learn as a plumber's mate, where someone's teaching you hands-on, or are you able to sit and study on your own in a room and you can flourish in that environment? So I think a lot of it's about personally the way you learn and the way you develop, and therefore that will help make the choice between whether you do an apprenticeship, whether you do a degree, and your personal circumstance.
We've seen an awful lot in the media about how young people are bearing the brunt of the COVID pandemic. And I know, Leo, you wrote our paper for the 5% Club last summer. And we've also seen quite a decrease in the number of apprenticeships. Gillian, what can our members and industry collectively do to help on youth unemployment? It's such a big issue at the moment.
I think for your members, I mean, there's never been a better time to start investing in building your high quality apprenticeship routes, your skills pipeline, to giving those offers, even to building up through T-levels placements. There's a lot of options now to get involved. There's never been a better time. If you look more globally and you look at the skills that, that we we've got massive skills shortages in this country. In fact, in every country around the world. And they're in specific areas, in many areas, but you'll find there's lots in construction. I'm sure Leo can talk about this. There's lots in anything to do with digital, anything to do with engineering, but also health, mental health. And if you look at what's happened with the pandemic, every single country has gone through a very similar experience. And every single country is going to be, obviously, we've massively used health resources and scientific resources, and we're going to rebuild by building back better. And, every country is going to have infrastructure investments to try and help their economy recover. And that's going to mean massive skills shortages. So it's a really strategic thing to do to build up your skills pipeline. And the more you put in, the more you'll get out. It's the best ROI you'll ever get, I believe. I mean, I worked for my first employer, General Motors, for 8 years. I would still be there now, apart from I wanted to move to a city, as opposed to car factories tend to be in the middle of nowhere. And I was kind of, I was young and eager to live in a city. But, you really do get a lot back from people that if you give them a shot, they know they're getting a shot. They'll take it very seriously. They'll give you everything. So, never been a better time. And helping people on their journey. We all had help on our journey. And I think that's probably why Leo does what he does now. It's what I do. It's why I'm a politician. I want to give as much people the options that I had, who were sat in a Knowsley Comprehensive School today. Those getting those options, particularly if you're from an area like Knowsley, you've got to work harder to get those options. So please, for everybody involved, do what you can to support our young people, and they'll repay you.
And Leo, I know this is an issue that's really close to your heart, and youth unemployment and giving people opportunities to gain skills was behind the creation of the club. I mean, at Balfour Beatty, you've really been increasing opportunities for young people. Do you want to outline some of that for us?
Yeah, look, Gillian, I think, really hit the nail on the head when she said there's no better return on investment than actually investing in people and developing skills. And it's very interesting. We live in a world today where we're talking a lot about sustainability. Well, we founded the 5% Club on the basis that there's nothing more important than sustaining capability. We need bricklayers, we need engineers, we need surveyors, and that capability has to be built up. And so we founded the 5% Club on the basis that, we need to encourage people to be investing in the future.
Gillian, you've sort of referred to this already about where you came from, people who didn't always face the greatest opportunities. COVID has really served to magnify inequalities in our society. How do you think apprenticeships can help those facing disadvantage?
Well, I think they're a game changer for many people. If you're, when I left school, it was in the 1980s, 1984, there was massive unemployment in the country and massive youth unemployment. And it was a very scary time to leave. And I think about most of my schoolmates, 92% of them were facing that without any qualifications as well. And the first lesson I learned going through that, and I'm really glad I'm in this job now because I can use it every day, is qualifications that you get if you go to those kind of schools. Even though we're really trying to make sure the school standards are really getting much higher across the country, there'll be many people you'll meet that don't have the qualifications that are that they could get if they were in a different environment. So that's the first lesson that I've learned, that don't let the bits of paper get in the way, because particularly with people who left school 10, 20 years ago, they can get wherever in life. And I've met so many brilliant examples now of people who have gone on to do an apprenticeship in their 30s and 40s, left school with no GCSEs, and they're now on their way to doing level 4, level 5, level 6, and sometimes level 7 apprenticeships. They just never got the shot at the time. So giving people the chance and the opportunity is something that I'm particularly passionate about. And that's why I love apprenticeships, because we have 600 standards in apprenticeships. You can be pretty much anything. The last one I signed off was a space engineering technician. And literally, you can get anywhere with an apprenticeship. There are all levels, and you can progress. And you can progress over time. And that's what I think is a really powerful point of an apprenticeship. And the amount of people now, we've had 5 million people who've done an apprenticeship since 2010, more or less. And about half of them are adults. And I've met a lot of those adults. And by and large, they're adults who really didn't get a great shot the first time round at school. And this apprenticeship option came to them later in life. Either they were working in the health system, or I met somebody who'd worked 16 years as a domiciliary in a hospital. And she came running out after me, actually. I tend to attract, I'm like the only apprentice in the village. So she came running out and said, I've done one too. And she just finished and just qualified as a children's paediatric nurse. And you just hear these stories time and time again. A guy who was worked for 22 years in insecure work cleaning toilets, who is now on his way to becoming a paramedic in Yorkshire. I just love what apprenticeships can do. The life chances they can offer at any stage of your life, I think, is really, really powerful. The oldest apprentice in this country is 76 years old, and he's doing a railway apprenticeship for GTR. I mean, I love the fact that these things the apprenticeships are available for anybody at any age, any stage, in almost any industry, to get to almost any career and to get to the top as well.
We've got people attending the event today who possibly aren't members. Obviously, you've got lots of members attending today. What would you say to them why they should join the club?
Well, look, first and foremost, they've got to have it at the heart of their mission, that they want to sort of build and give something back. And doing that within the community is really important. But the 5% Club was really founded on the basis that we can't live with a level of youth unemployment which is too high.
You've both referred to skills shortages, so I want to ask you to sort of talk about the future. Gillian, looking ahead to the next 10 years, there's already been lots of references to the green economy, the information age. What do you see that the skill challenges and the skills opportunities are?
Well, first of all, just on the 5% Club, could I just say to everybody, it's a brilliant initiative. I was very struck when I first met you, Leo, about the simplicity but brilliance of the club. And I think one of your newest members is now the Department for Education. So yes. I have been trying to get them to join since we first met, and I'm delighted that they now have, and I hope to get many, many other employers in the public sector to also join. In terms of skills, we've got a lot of challenges and opportunities facing us. Now, how does a challenge become an opportunity? Because you can do it. How can you do it? Because you have the skills. And if you look at the challenges we face, well, we've got the challenges of recovery and rebuilding our economy after this unbelievable period with the pandemic. And we've got that in a global scale as well. We've got the challenge of the net zero challenge and really changing a lot of what we do and a lot of our operating models and energy and lots of things by 2050. And we've got the challenge of competing in a global world, and increasingly, it's always been a global world since I've worked in it, but increasingly, particularly in the digital space and the acceleration of the use of digital, that there's a lot of competition. And of course, post-Brexit, that's changed some aspects in terms of opportunity and operating models. If I look at all the things that you need to do to be successful, if we think about industries we want to be successful, or science or technology we want to be successful, every single one of them is going to require the skills. And not only for us to have the skills, but us to be really good at the skills, because we're competing with lots of other people in lots of other places. And that is something that I don't underestimate as a challenge, but means that we really have to step up to the plate. And that's why there's been a huge focus on skills and apprenticeships and traineeships and all kinds of technical routes up through education as well with T-levels. That's why we've done a Skills for Jobs white paper, because we've got two things going on. The first is more and more people going to university, but still 34% of them not ending up in graduate jobs at the end of it. And we've also got still massive skills shortages. So, we need to make sure that people are given high quality routes to study and learn, come back later and study, take on second careers, and, think through their career choices the first time round, so that they can be aware of the opportunities and what skills are the skills of the future and how we're going to help them get those.
And Leo, I mean, how do you see the next 10 years in terms of those challenges and the industry response?
It's very important to remember that your attitude will ultimately determine your altitude. And there's no limit to how high somebody can go. It all comes down to how much effort do you want to put in to get there? And to my mind, it's really important that people remember the specific skills are important, but the life skills in terms of how you communicate, how you interact, how you socialize, how much energy you bring to the job, that's actually more important, because those things are transferable. They're transferable across every industry.
And I completely agree, by the way. The attitude, I love that. I've just written down the attitude, altitude. Expect me to be saying that soon, because it's a great saying. But attitude, and I think of myself as a 16-year-old, walking through this car factory, completely terrified. But all of those hurdles that you overcome, and you're learning from everybody. You're learning from thousands of people around you, or hundreds of people around you, not just your tutors or whatever.
I think you raise a very interesting point. It's a little bit like we're looking and talking about today vaccine passports, but ultimately skills is a skill passport. You learn things through your life. You put it into a big reservoir of knowledge and experience, and that passport stays with you throughout your life, which qualifies you to do lots of things. So the idea is, in this day and age, you can have 3, 4, or 5 different careers, and the apprenticeship and the 5% club and those institutions help support that and make that possible. We are looking at a very different type of employment for people in the future, with lots of variety and lots of interest created by the diversity that's out there. What we'd really like to do is get the government to stand behind the 5% club being the kite mark for the benchmark for industry performance in the area of apprenticeships, and that kite mark then represents a certain quality of training and development that the employer will put back into the apprentice. And I think that's something the government could very, very easily do. I think the other thing that we would like is we'd like the government to use its purchasing power to say, for example, if you want to qualify on this tender list, you have to demonstrate a track record of how you've invested back in capability and trained and brought young people on. And again, part of that might well be that you are a member of the 5% club. And if we can get those things in place, it gets people to sort of think and understand that they can make a real difference in terms of bringing on the next generation. The other thing that'd be nice is that we, in large companies like Balfour, Beatty, FTSE 350s, we have a section in our annual report called Corporate Social Responsibility. It would be nice as a requirement within the sustainability section of that report, where we measure CO2 and we measure all of these societal, environmental criteria, that we got everybody to report out on where does their company perform in terms of the 5% club, because ultimately what gets measured gets done. And if you put it into the annual report under corporate social responsibility, it then becomes a board issue. And once a year, the board look at it and say, are we doing enough about moving ourselves towards this 5% target? In the same way that we've put the 30% criteria in there for women on boards, why wouldn't we be looking at apprentices within companies?
I completely agree with you. If we could do the same for apprentices and offering young people those opportunities and building your skills pipeline, that would be a great achievement. And I definitely look forward to working with you on that. As I say, we've got the DFE and I'm determined to continue. I think it's a brilliant way of doing it. And as you say, corporate social responsibility has become something that companies take much, much more seriously. And this to be part of that, offering those opportunities and building your skills pipeline, I think would be a great way to do it.
Gillian, might I take a second just to compliment you? First and foremost, I think your energy and enthusiasm is fantastic. The leadership you just exude around the topic, and all of it comes from what is your very sort of natural persona and personality. So to find somebody in a ministerial role of your caliber is an absolute delight.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much,
Leo. Gillian, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful interview and really, really interesting. And thank you both for your time today. And I'd like to thank Gillian and Leo again for such a fantastic in-conversation session. I hope you all really enjoyed that. And I want to welcome Mark Cameron. Mark's been working on a partly volunteer basis for the club since last August. But Mark, welcome and congratulations on becoming the club's new CEO. And a formal welcome from me, even though we have been working together for a few months. Mark, you've just completed a career in the Royal Navy. What did that entail?
Thanks, Jill, and thanks again for the very warm welcome. It's been an absolute privilege to work with you over the last few months and to get to know the 5% Club. So yeah, great to see pictures of myself from a bygone era, but I joined the Royal Navy in 1982 and completed a full apprenticeship. A very impressionable period for me. As a 16-year-old, I had lots to learn, and I found a balance of training brought me out of my shell. I was quite introverted, quite shy, and there was a lot to learn in a naval environment, as you can imagine, as a 16-year-old. But I did go on and complete my apprenticeship, and I'm very proud of that fact, because actually we've heard already today how many people's careers have been shaped by apprenticeships. But having completed my apprenticeship, I was then selected for officer training. I went through BRNC Dartmouth and then moved on to complete that technical aspects in 1993. So across a 38-year career, 11 of those years were in training. So some might say I was a slow learner.
Were there any particular highlights and experiences you think have already and will help you in your role at the 5% Club?
Well, thanks, Jill. Lots of operational tools, lots of experience I gained whilst I was in the Royal Navy. You can see there an old picture of me. You also see how cameras have changed over the period. But that's me as a 16-year-old, and on the right-hand side, that's me towards the end of my career. Lots of operational tours, as I've said. I've been to the Arctic Circle, I've been to the Falkland Islands, been to the Caribbean, and spent a fair bit of time in the Middle East, as most military people have. But some of the greatest things I've achieved is in the latter stages of my career. Although I trained as an engineer, I was actually involved in people and human resources. And in particular, I was involved with the Royal Navy recruiting and was delighted to be partially involved in the Made in the Royal Navy campaign, which in many respects summarises my own career. Towards the latter end of my career, I was in the MOD as the policy head for training, education, skills, recruiting and resettlement. And part of that is where I first came across the 5% Club, which was a great insight. Was also involved in apprenticeships policy across government, which was really good. And now, as a proud former apprentice and a veteran, and I'm very proud of my veteran's badge, I'm delighted to be involved with the 5% and hopefully take that agenda forward.
So what were your initial impressions of the club? Be gentle, Mark, that might include one about me.
I absolutely relish working with the 5% Club. It's been a really warm welcome thus far. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. You know, under your guidance, Jill, we've got to 525 members, over 1 million employees, and of those 61,000 people in Earn and Learn. And I think the 5% Club is an exceptionally vibrant community, all of whom are passionate about the Earn and Learn agenda. And it's been a real privilege to see that in action. I think the other point to bear out, 60% of our members are small to medium-sized enterprises. And that's a unique factor in the overall aspects. But I think sometimes there is some confusion of what the 5% Club stands for, in particular, the push for social equality, social inclusion. And I think not only are we about the metric of 5% of the workforce, but we want that workforce to be accessible. I think the key thing with the 5% Club is how we alleviate poverty and skills shortages. We focus on workplace learning. Workplace learning develops employability skills. With employability skills, we hope to increase employment. And if employment is increased, then we'll alleviate poverty and skill shortages across the nation.
Many people might not realise that the club actually gained charitable status in August 2018, and we are guided by a volunteer board of 5 trustees. Are you clear as to the intent from the trustees about what our priorities are?
Yes, I think so. I think the trustees have been very clear as to where we go. They're guided by a set of charitable objects which are rested with Charities House, and we strive to deliver those. So it's pretty obvious the 5% Club encourages Earn and Learn schemes. That sort of says what it does on the tin. But also I think we're very good at encouraging good and best practice through the various events we hold. We also conduct research, and we'll come on to some of that later when we explore some of the ideas we've got for the future. And we're also there to assist young people. I think if you were to talk to the trustees, though, they'd like to explore how we assist young people a bit further. At the moment, we do that working with our members, but in the future that may take a different angle and we'll need to explore that. So if you ask me what the trustees' focus would be, the focus would be on that direct assistance to young people.
What are your ambitions for the club, and how do you see helping our members harness the potential of emerging talent?
So for me, the work we've done, you and I have done together over the last 6 months in reshaping the purpose of the club has been key. I think the club has been able now to focus on exactly what we do with our new purpose, which is inspiring positive action for increased and accessible workplace learning for all. And as I mentioned, that's about the numbers, but also about the accessibility of that activity. I think we've got some great initiatives moving forward. I think we've all been bored to death of Zoom calls over the lockdown, and events such as these today show how the club seeks to embrace innovation, and we're grateful to our colleagues here at M for assisting that. But also what we can do is work with our members to really validate and celebrate what they do. And one of the things we'd love to do is to explore the percentages that and the metrics people have got, and offer some way of celebration as to their achievements and validate what they do. And continue to work with our partners and stakeholders. We'll hear later on about investors in people, and hopefully that will encourage some of our members to be involved in those schemes as well.
So, what next? How do we make this ambition a reality, Mark?
Well, a good question. I think the key thing is to keep on doing what we've done well. Our members relish the events we've held, the Zoom events, the interactions we get through those. I think there's more we can do. I talked about the research, and hopefully when we go through that, our research will lead to some really insightful findings and help us then feed those back to the membership through hopefully a symposium in November. And hopefully that symposium will be back in the real world as opposed to the digital environment we've been in over the last 12 months or so. I think the other aspects as a campaigning charity, it's key that the 5% Club sets out what we want to achieve with policymakers and government. And our work on shaping a manifesto, which we'll talk about later as well, will be key in achieving that.
Thanks, Mark. You're the third speaker today who started their career in Earn and Learn. Obviously, we had Gillian Keegan and we had Leo and you. So it's really good to see that we've got so many influential people who've experienced Earn and Learn. Look forward to working with you. And actually, I know I share your ambition that we really hope we can get out there and meet as many of our members as possible in real time, face to face. And now, along with our member events that many of you are familiar with, the club is also committed to engaging with government and policymakers across the UK. You'll have seen that from today's agenda and our guests. Also, Robert Halfon, Chair of the Education Select Committee, is on our steering group. We have a very vibrant and lively advisory panel of members who help shape our views, and of course also our patrons. But we're always keen to get more feedback from members as to what their views are.
The 5% Club is in active discussion with all governments across the UK. In England, we engage closely with officials and colleagues within Department for Education, and I've been invited to represent the 5% Club on the Intermediary Ambassador Network, a new body formed just over a year ago where members who represent employers are invited to have active discussions on policy developments in England. As well as that engagement, we're also represented on the all-party parliamentary groups on apprenticeships, and I've recently given evidence to the House of Lords Special Inquiry into youth unemployment. Outside of England, we also are in active discussion with colleagues in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. And in the latter, in particular, we've been actively involved in working through the developing young workforce regime and also looking at the young person's guarantee.
I was very lucky last summer to be invited to join the Youth Employment Group, a collection of charities and not-for-profits, all concerned about how the young are bearing the brunt of COVID-19. We produced last summer a thought leadership paper on the impact of COVID on the young, authored by our founder Leo Quinn, and we have a range of thought leadership papers on our website. Earlier this year, the Department for Education published a white paper into Skills
and development opportunities for growth. Our founder, Leo Quinn, is a member of the Build Back Better Business Council and actively in discussion with very senior officials and parliamentarians on how this should be taken forward. We responded positively to the white paper, which we thought had a number of very commendable attributes. That said, the 5% Club are keen that government in England and across the UK go further. In particular, we'll be launching a manifesto later this month or early next month, which will address the following points. We're looking for a more joined-up approach in order to pull together the initiatives which government have produced in order to deliver the maximum benefit. As with all organisations involved with Earn and Learn, we're looking at apprenticeship levy reform, in particular looking at the timeliness of the usage of the levy and more flexibility in how it can be used. We welcome the support with the lifelong skills guarantee or learning guarantee, and we would very much welcome government policy to help assist with a shift from a focus on early careers for learning and development to a lifelong approach.
As previously mentioned, Robert Halfon's a great supporter of the club, an active member of our steering group. Unfortunately, Robert couldn't be with us today, but he's kindly recorded this 5-minute interview for us.
Welcome to Robert Halfon, Chair of the Education Select Committee, known to many of the people who are attending our event today. And Robert's also a great friend of the club. So Robert, thank you very much for your time today. Great.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
So let's get straight into the questions. Gosh, young people, as we know, are really bearing the brunt of COVID, whether they're in school or college or at university or doing an apprenticeship or trying to find a foothold in the workplace. What advice would you offer to young people looking to make those choices around further education and their career?
Well, Jill, I hope you don't mind if I start off by first of all thanking all the supporters of the 5% Club, because it's incredible what you do, and you're an important force of skills and training, but the companies who are on it invest in skills and training. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, and it makes a huge difference. What should young people do now? Well, it's going to be tough, so we have to be honest about the situation, but there are good things that the government have done with announcements of what's called Kickstart money, and thousands of pounds are being given to companies if they hire young people. Thousands of pounds are being given to companies if they hire apprenticeships as well. And I would urge every young person who is thinking about what to do next to consider applying for an apprenticeship, whether it's level 2 right up to a degree level apprenticeship, because of course you may be at university, that's a wonderful thing, but if you do an apprenticeship, you earn while you learn, there's no debt, and you're virtually providing you complete your apprenticeship, 90% who complete get the job afterwards or go on to further or additional education. So it's a win-win, and because there is now this financial incentive to companies to hire apprentices, hopefully that will literally kickstart and incentivize companies to offer more opportunities.
Well, on the theme of companies and what more organisations can do, the Education Select Committee published a paper, A Plan for Adult Skills and Lifelong Learning, and you talked about the 4th Industrial Revolution, the shift to lifelong learning. What more can businesses do to help with this process as part of the Building Back Better?
Yeah, so this adult lifelong learning report, what we suggested was that every adult is given a lifelong learning account and given a sort of like a voucher system in a way that they can choose some kind of adult learning of their choice, whether it might be going to an adult community centre, it might be going to an FE college, it might be going towards a university or an apprenticeship. We also suggested that there should be an adult community learning centre in every town, because that's often the first step for people, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, to do education. And the business question which you've asked is really important, because unlike the members of the 5% Club, we do have a problem in this country that businesses are not retraining their workers, and we're pretty low compared to many other countries in Europe. And what I've proposed is, our committee, the Education Committee has proposed, is a skills tax credit for businesses. So if businesses currently have a research and development tax credit for R&D. Why not, if they retrain their workers or employ people for skills that the country needs, particularly in STEM, areas of STEM, why not give them a skills credit? So that will incentivize them to retrain their workers or employ people with particular skills that are needed. And in terms of artificial intelligence and robotics, automation, this is going to present huge challenges to our country. 28% of jobs currently done by young people could be lost by 2030, according to some statistics. There's lots of other ones. Now, that doesn't mean that new opportunities won't be available, but the world is going to change. This is going to be a revolution like no other, because previous industrial revolution, agricultural revolution, they were all affected manual labor. This is going to affect everyone from manual labor to right through to journalism and even to people in painting. You can see now paintings being sold, made by robots for thousands of pounds. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to retrain. This is why retraining and skills are going to be so important. I went to one bank in the city where they're saying they were getting rid of all their accountants because it could all be done by artificial intelligence, but they weren't losing their jobs. They were retraining them to do cyber. And that was a good example, but that is going to happen across the board. There are going to be new jobs from this, which some of them which we don't know, but we're going to have to retrain and reskill all the time.
Yeah, because it was interesting. I've made a note the fact that the committee, the education subcommittee, had identified that many employers offer no training to their staff, which is quite shocking to me, because our members, we attract the best and those who really want to excel in investing in people with earn and learn. Are there any other things that could be done to reverse that shortfall? You've outlined some really good ideas. Anything further you think that should be done to those companies?
The skills tax credit, I think, would be an important thing. I think what the government are doing is they're doing front loading it, if you like, with the Kickstart scheme to try and help. I think there's also got to be a cultural change. I went to Germany and Switzerland to see what goes on there, and it's such a completely different attitude. I mean, they have people from 14 giving them work experience. And I remember asking one director of a company, I said, why do you do this? And he said, well, what do you mean why? It's our duty. And now we need a cultural change. And what really makes a difference is when people at the top start evangelizing about skills and apprenticeships. And I believe in the power of narrative and language. And when the Prime Minister does it, it makes a huge difference. So the fact that he's talking now all the time about lifetime skills guarantee, I think is very helpful. He's talked about an apprentice guarantee as well, because whoever is the Prime Minister, whenever the Prime Minister speaks, the whole of Whitehall follows. But it isn't just the Prime Minister, it's got to be parliamentarians, it's got to be the 5% Club and other businesses to kind of create that cultural shift, because you can have the financial incentives, but we need that cultural change as well.
And part of that cultural change, I'm thinking, it was a phrase I remember I first heard from you when you talked about parity of esteem. And, there is that whole thing of the vocational route and academic route being seen as equally valid. That's so important, isn't it?
Well, you're completely right. I mean, my dream is, sometimes you might have dinner with friends or whatever, and then somebody says, oh, I'm going to Oxford, or I went to Oxford, and people go, wow, what did you do? And that's very nice. But what I would like to happen is if somebody gets up and says, oh, I'm doing an apprenticeship with Jaguar, or I'm doing an apprenticeship rating, or I'm doing a policing degree apprenticeship, or I'm a nursing degree apprenticeship, and everyone goes, wow, and has a 10-minute conversation and thinks how incredible that is, because these things are incredible. And that we treat our universities, because we judge our elite universities on the basis of how much research they're doing. We should judge our universities on how they are helping young people with skills and what good outcomes the students have. Are they getting good skilled jobs with good pay when they come out? Are they helping the disadvantaged, and are they meeting the skills needs of the nation? And I think that we judge the best universities in the wrong way. That doesn't mean I don't love Oxbridge. Who doesn't? It's something our country should be proud of. But I think we need to look at universities and education in a completely different way. And that's why I absolutely am passionate about degree apprenticeships, because I think it solves so many problems. It provides a ladder of opportunity for the disadvantaged. As I said before, no debt, earn while you learn, good job at the end. It meets our skills needs. It also creates that parity of esteem, because not only you're getting that university experience, but also doing an apprenticeship, and it is a cascade of prestige all the way down right to level 2. It creates a real prestige around apprenticeships. And if I had a dream, it would be 50% of students doing degree apprenticeships. I'd also have every student, if possible, as part of their degree, doing a significant amount of work experience. I don't mean just going off for a year. I'm talking about a few days a week. So even if you're doing English literature, for example, you should perhaps work in a publisher or whatever it may be. If you're doing history, you could work in a museum or do archaeology work experience. But I think we need to change the nature. Yes, you have that academic learning, but all the way through the school system, right up to university, courses should be partly based on work experience in businesses.
Yeah, I identify with that. I did an English degree, and then I worked in a bookshop with my first job, and I learnt more about books in 3 months than I did in 3 years of an English degree. So I can certainly agree with that.
Bookshop?
It was a bookshop. It was a chain that was called Hammocks in northwest London, and it's no longer there. But yes.
I originally came from northwest London before.
It was Harrow.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, that was my neck of the woods.
I was East Finchley, really.
Oh right, yeah.
Cottage as well.
Yeah, a great industry. Actually, it's really interesting to talk about degree apprenticeships. Can I move to sort of the other part of the scale? And talk about level 2s, because of course level 2 apprenticeships are seen as a great way for people perhaps from less advantaged backgrounds to enter the workplace, and are also kind of seen as a mechanism around social mobility. What's your take on what's happening around level 2s? Because we're seeing quite a decline in them.
Yeah. So I absolutely believe that level 2 is a important bridge and an important skill. What I think the problem has been in the past is that people just did a level 2 and that was that. And what I would like to see is level 2 as basically the first rung on that ladder for progression. So that I'd like people to do a level 2 and then do a level 3 rather than just do a level 2. And now many people do, and there is that progression, but often when I've met level 2 apprentices, they haven't even been told that they can do a level 3 or that option is, or they don't know, haven't thought about it. And I think there should be a lot. So if it's a form of progression, absolutely, because it's an important bridge to do. I understand why the government are doing level 3, because they're looking at it in terms of A levels and equivalents, which we were talking about just before. And I completely get it, but we shouldn't get rid of, absolutely, we should keep level 2s as long as they are a part of that ladder and not something in itself.
Do you think the structure of the levy, the way people perhaps, if a company wants to use a lot of its levy, therefore it might gravitate towards the higher, more expensive apprenticeships? Do you think the levy is hindering that level 2?
I believe in the levy because I think it helps change the culture. You now have, when you meet these big companies, you now have people on the board whose sole job is to deal with apprenticeships, or very, very senior people in the company. Now, that would not have happened 10 or 15 years ago that I can think of. And I remember going to a big pet company in Harlow, and my constituency is Harlow in Essex, and meeting one of the top directors of this massive, massive company. And they were their sole job was to do apprenticeships. And I thought, how brilliant is that? But what I would do is I would reform the levy in the sense that if companies had younger people and people from disadvantaged backgrounds and met our skills needs, then I would allow the companies to use more of their levy. So I would tune it that way rather than using it just. I'm doing a degree apprenticeship in itself is a good thing, of course, but we need to encourage degree apprenticeships in skills that we need as a country. If the government are going to partly fund this, it is strategically right to say, well, we have a shortage in nursing or STEM or whatever it might be, and so therefore we will allow you to use more of your levy if you are training people in those things. And I think that's the way I would reform the levy.
And I think that's great. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, because we've probably done all of our sort of questions. I was just going to finish by saying, thank you, Robert. You are a great supporter of the 5% Club, and I know you bang the drum for us and say very nice things about us, as you did in your intro. So thank you very, very much for finding time to be with us today and for encouraging people to be part of the club.
It's a pleasure, and it's an amazing organisation, and every company in the country should belong to it. Basically, every company. So very good luck in all you do, and I'm pleased to support you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
This now brings us to our next session. Many of you will be familiar with the Investor in People name, but you may not realise that Investors in People have just launched We Invest in Apprentices. So I'd now like to welcome Paul Devoy, CEO of Investors in People. Welcome, Paul. And Kirstie Thompson, Apprenticeship Compliance Manager at South Western Railway. Welcome both of you, and thank you for joining us today. Paul, I'd like to open with you. If you can explain to our audience, or for those people who aren't familiar with Investors in People, the background.
Thanks very much, Jill. Yes, Investors in People has been around for 30 years. We're an independent, not-for-profit organisation. Our purpose is really simple but powerful, and that's to make work better. Make work better for organisations, because we know that organisations who invest in their people are 21% more profitable, but also 17% more productive. It's also really good for employees. We spend over 80,000 hours of our lives at work, and it's important that we create workplaces that enable each individual to fulfil their potential. And we also have 526,000 people in the UK suffering from workplace stress. So what we do is help organisations understand how to improve their people management practices to create a happier, healthier, more productive workforce that makes their organisation more successful. And in doing that, we create a more prosperous society.
Thanks, Paul. You've just launched the We Invest in Apprentices framework, and we're going to bring an image of the framework up, by the way, so our audience will be able to see that, Paul. How did you identify the need for and the content for that framework?
Yeah, thank you. We were commissioned by the Department for Education to develop this framework. The reason that it was put in place, there's not a signal in the market to say which organisations offer really high quality apprenticeship schemes. And we believe that everyone undertaking apprenticeship should have a high quality scheme. And that's what the government believes in as well. So what we want to do is to make it almost like an expectation of every employer that they run a really excellent scheme. And what this framework does is help employers understand what excellent looks like and gives them a route map that they can then follow in order to ensure that their scheme not only improves, but improves over the longer term. And organisations who sign up for this and meet these standards will get the benefit of the accreditation and be able to show to their employees and potential employees and their wider stakeholders that they really emphasise the importance of creating high quality apprenticeships.
And Kirstie, South Western Railway have been an early adopter of the framework. What made you decide to get involved?
We've had a relationship with Investors in People for several years now, and we're given the opportunity to get involved in the pilot. For me, I'm one of the only people in South Western Railway that actually knows about apprenticeships and promotes the programme. So for me, it was great having independent assessors coming in to start talking about how good our programme is and really doing that evaluation bit that I haven't had the opportunity to do.
So what would you say your early impressions were about the product, and what do you think the company's gained from adopting it?
I was a little bit apprehensive at first because a lot of our apprenticeships are focused on upskilling rather than the more traditional coming in as an engineer or the more traditional apprenticeship program. So when I had the first conversation with Investors in People, that was something we spoke about. How do we identify the actual upskilling colleagues within the business? I think Investors in People were very open to what I was saying and actually had a look at their framework to make sure that what they were looking to do was going to fit in with what our business model is around apprenticeships. The assessment, there was so much detail. They got so much information out of my apprenticeship colleagues, speaking to both my training providers as well. It was such a positive experience. and to get a silver accreditation out of it, that's something I'm really proud of, because I had no idea we were doing as well as an independent person would say we were.
So what would you say to companies listening to this? Why should they get involved and why should they look at the framework?
So I now know that Investors in People are telling South Western Railway that we have a great apprenticeship programme, and I have a clear action plan and a roadmap to get us even better. And that's given me buy-in to the rest of the business. I can now start promoting our apprenticeship programme. I can use the Investors in People logo. I think it gives us a lot more recognition, and you know, there's somebody else. It's not just me saying that we're doing it really well.
Great, thank you. And Paul, finally back to you. What last words from you about your ambitions for the We Invest in Apprenticeships and how it's going to help the apprenticeship world?
Yeah, but our ambition is that there be an expectation on every employer that runs an apprenticeship scheme to work towards this accreditation, because in doing so, we'll be able to know who's the employers out there that take their apprenticeship scheme seriously and are actually committed to running a quality apprenticeship scheme. Because the framework's very holistic. You can see it covers your commitment as an employer to run an apprenticeship scheme. Do you have a business case for it? Have you got objectives? Really thought through why you're doing it? It also then focuses on the development of the apprentice. Are they well managed? Are they getting the support they need? Are they getting the career progression that they should expect? And then are you celebrating and communicating how well your apprenticeship programme is delivering, not only for the apprentice, but the overall positive impact that we know apprenticeship schemes have on organisations. So for me, it's a win-win all round. It helps the employer create a great apprenticeship scheme, creates great life chances for the individuals that go through it, but also provides a signal out there that everyone knows who the employers are that are really committed to driving apprenticeships forward and making them highly, highly successful and desirable.
That's great. Thank you very much, both. Thank you to Paul and Kirstie for giving us a rundown of the new framework. And just a reminder to members of the 5% Club, the 5% Club is in partnership with Investors in People, and we've negotiated a very good discount for our members, and there's more details on our website.
Thanks, Jill, and I'm delighted as the final section to introduce our new scheme, which we're looking to launch today, and which will go live over the summer and hopefully lead into a symposium later in the year, which I'll just outline now. As Jill said, when new members join the 5% Club, everybody signs a charter, and that charter says that hopefully within 5 years of joining the 5% Club, the aspiration is that employers have 5% of the workforce in earn and learn roles. Earn and learn from a 5% perspective are apprenticeships, sponsored students, and graduate trainees, sponsored students covering course placements from HNDs to PhDs. Beyond that, signing the commitment, we've also captured data, but the 5% Club is all about capturing and enhancing employer behaviour. And we feel the time is now right to start to recognise and reward those positive behaviours our employer members demonstrate. As has been mentioned, we now represent over 1 million employees, and 6.1% of the population of the employees are engaged in those recognised work and learn schemes. But some of those schemes are broader. There's the new Kickstart scheme, there's apprenticeship schemes, and I mentioned earlier about the white paper, and there are a load of broader schemes that are in the pipeline, including the Lifelong Skills Guarantee. What we hope to achieve with the employer audit is to take the commitment our members have demonstrated and take that further, but take it further in a positive way that really reinforces the commitment and the achievements our members make. We heard from Paul Devoy earlier about the We Invest in Apprentices programme, which assures the guarantees the quality of a scheme. But the 5% Club is very much focused on the outcomes that are achieved. The traditional outcome being 5% of the workforce, but we think the outcomes can be broader, and I'll go into that in a moment. The process we're going to go through to bring this scheme to life is focus on validation of the data sets held by our members. There's lots of information out there that cover the 5% Club, but we can go further in terms of ambitions for the future, and also we've talked a lot today about inequality and perhaps to look at social mobility and how we can improve the life chances of people. So validation of data will form a key part of this scheme. but the scheme will all be about recognition. And the approach we'll adopt will be to award all participants of the scheme a graded award, ranging from bronze through silver to gold. And Martin Birchall, who I'll introduce in a moment, will talk us through that. But the scheme is not just about badges. What we want to achieve with the scheme is learning. And what the scheme will do, will research members' behaviours and then set that in context and provide insights back to members so that they can make improvements on both the percentages they achieve and also on the approach to the social mobility I talked about. And then finally, we'd like to celebrate what our members do. We want to shout from the rooftops what our members achieve, and we want to work with our members who have delivered those outputs to deliver that. And that's why we've talked about a symposium and the learning where we want to get together later this year, hopefully in person, to talk through the findings of the approach we take. Everything in the 5% Club now is based on lists of 5, unsurprisingly. And our founder has a great quote, which is, "What gets measured gets done," which I've put on this slide. Clearly, the focus of the scheme will be the 5%. But there's a broader aspect to go through. We want to look at breadth and balance. It's not just about apprenticeships, it's about grad schemes, it's about sponsored students, but also it's about work placements and traineeships. And we want to look at ambitions for growth. As we come out of the pandemic and the economic downturn that we're in, we want to see growth. And therefore, we want to look at our employer members' ambitions and recognise that. We want to look at quality. Quality for us has got many dimensions. Quality is about the delivery of the scheme. What's the student and learner experience about? But also, does the quality result in them being effective in the workplace when they ultimately get there? And do they complete the courses that they started? It's no use having the world's best scheme if no one completes it. And finally, we want to look at the really complicated area of inclusion and social mobility. A thorny area for statistics and data, but we're hopeful we can do something about it. Process we'll go through, I'll briefly outline. We'll launch the scheme today. We're going to go through, from today, a period of application where members can express interest and look to join the scheme. We'll conduct the research in June and July. We'll pull the results together, and then we'll feed that into a symposium and conference later in the year. So I've talked about what the 5% Club wants to achieve. It's now with great privilege and pleasure that I introduce Martin Birchall from High Flyers, who will take us through his experience in this field, but also the approach we're going to take forward.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, High Flyers Research started researching the graduate job market some 3 decades ago, and we've launched the Times Top 100 Graduate Employers. It's our annual guide to the country's top graduate employers. That's been with us since the end of the 1990s. And we were delighted to work with the National Apprenticeship Service to launch their Top 100 Apprenticeship Employers in October last year. So we've spent a great deal of time working with employers to understand how they recruit graduates, how they recruit apprenticeships, and all of the work they're doing with early talent recruitment. So it's a real privilege to be working with the 5% Club on this new initiative, putting together an employer audit, which Mark has introduced the background and philosophy to. It's an annual assessment for all of club members, whether they be large or small, and it really leads to 3 key things. The first is official accreditation. So for the first time, club members will be designated as either bronze, silver or gold, recognising where they are on their journey towards 5% and beyond. So for those who are just starting, bronze will be the first award. For those who are halfway to 5%, they'll be achieving a silver accreditation. And for those who are at 5% or have gone beyond, they'll be classed as gold. But every employer taking part in the audit will also have their own benchmarking research. So for all of the aspects that we're looking at within the audit, they'll be able to compare their results with other key competitors across their sector and across all of the other club members who take part in the audit. And that's a great check and balance to see how their recruitment and how their progress towards 5% compares with others they're competing with for early talent recruitment. And then, of course, we'll be finishing with employer awards. So it means that we can look at the very best in class across different categories. So whether it's graduate employment, apprenticeships, sponsored students and beyond. So the audit really deals with 5 key aspects, and Mark outlined the detail of that, but it's all underpinned by recruitment. So how close to the 5% are each of the club members getting? The breadth and balance, is there a good balance between graduates, apprentices and other earners you learn? All of the focus on inclusion and social mobility, making sure that the recruitment is as diverse as possible, the quality of the programmes on offer, and then crucially the future growth plans. So the recruitment looks at what's been achieved so far. Future growth is all about looking ahead in terms of what's coming next. And the process for all of this, well, we designed it to be as simple and straightforward as possible. So it starts with an employer questionnaire, which will go live in the summer. There'll be a few weeks for employers to put together their data and submit it. That then leads to a bespoke research report, which is produced for each individual employer. It's done on a confidential basis, so each of the employers taking part can see exactly how they compare with some of their key competitors. And then it will culminate with our annual celebration of all of the results. So the announcement of who's got bronze, silver and gold, the awards for the current year. So that'll all be in October, November time. So it's a really, really exciting project to be involved in. We are delighted that we're partnering with the 5% Club to deliver all this. So a busy summer ahead, Mark, but very exciting to be able to work together and look forward to the first set of results later in the year.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Martin. Thanks for that excellent insight into what High Flyers has achieved in other schemes and how High Flyers energy and experience can be brought to bear with the 5% Club. I really do hope members get a broad understanding of this. There's more information now on our website, and I'd encourage you to look there to either speak to Jill and myself or send inquiries to the feedback email we saw earlier. But please do get involved, and we look forward to your participation and ultimately seeing you in person at the symposium in October or November.
Thank you to everyone for joining us today and for those of you who have posted in chat. I also want to thank all our speakers, in particular Gillian Keegan, Robert Halfon and of course our founder Leo Quinn.
When Jill introduced the event, she mentioned our patron supporters, and I'd like to reiterate my thanks and all of those at the 5% Club and our trustees for the continued support of our patrons, without whom the 5% Club wouldn't exist and certainly couldn't operate. I'd like to thank the team here at M Integrated Solutions for their fantastic support in this event. They've given their time for free and really helped the club shift the dial away from Zoom walls to something slightly different. We hope we can continue with these kind of events into the future, but clearly there'll be a blend of face-to-face meetings and digital for those of you who wish to view from home. We mentioned in the employer audit our symposium in October, November. I hope to see as many of you there as possible when that event occurs. So until then, goodbye and thank you to you all again for supporting us today.
Goodbye.